Hi everybody, welcome to the class and I hope you have a good Saturday and a nice weekend. The plan for today is very similar compared to the other classes and the structure will be almost the same. I hope we have no problem with the connection and no problem with the Wi-Fi and the technology, and hopefully there's no disruption from the dog in the garden and people working from home. So the idea is to give the free classes, and particularly during the pandemic with the restrictions, it's a good idea to help, and that's the idea. And I continue with this project. You can see on the left, this was the plan for last week. Every morning there is a speaking session at 9 o'clock. So if you want to practice your speaking, you are welcome to attend and to join the speaking group. It's from Monday to Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning on Zoom, and it's open for everybody for all levels. And you can join the WhatsApp group to participate and to book your place. There's a small fee of €1, but it's very good practice for correction, for speaking, and for vocabulary. Also, next week we will hopefully continue with the free classes at 11:15, and we will look at different aspects of English, and hopefully you enjoy and you will benefit from the classes as well. So that's the plan for next week. And also we will continue with specific webinars every day next week. On Monday at 4 o'clock, it's a grammar webinar. On Tuesday at 4 o'clock, it's maybe sport, but possibly we can change the topic on Tuesday. Wednesday at 4 o'clock, it's specific for IELTS. Thursday at 4 o'clock, it's a specific webinar for the advanced. Friday, it's a specific webinar for business. And Saturday, usually it's a specific webinar at 1 o'clock for the B2 exam. So the structure, the schedule, the timetable next week will be practically the same as this week, and you are welcome to attend, and hopefully you can benefit from the class and you can learn something from the class. I know it's difficult to learn English. I know it's a long process and you need a lot of patience, you need a lot of persistence, and you need to study a lot to learn English, but also to practice. So hopefully these classes can help a little, and that is the idea of the free classes. Okay. The agenda today will be very similar compared to other days, and I will show you my screen to begin. So first I'm going to check that we are functioning and we are working online. So hopefully with Facebook we are still connected, because sometimes we have difficulties with the connection. So just to make sure, yes, we're working on Facebook, that's good. So this document on the left is the first important document. Maybe today is your first class, and welcome if it's your first class. Maybe you are returning to visit the class, and you are welcome as well. And maybe you are watching recorded, or possibly some people are watching live. So welcome to everybody. And this document on the left is the same for everybody. It's important for everybody, for beginners, intermediate, and experts. This document, in my opinion, is maybe the most important document when you learn English. All the topics in relation to English are here, so you need to be very familiar with the important concepts on the left, and I will just introduce today the important vocabulary and the important terms, because they are very important and you need to be very familiar with every term and every concept on the left, because this is the structure of English. So for me, there are three categories and three sections in yellow. The first section is the use of English, and the majority of my class, most of my classes, focus on this area, the use of English. In the use of English, we have phrasal verbs and we have idioms. So phrasal verbs are very particular to English, and maybe you are familiar already with phrasal verbs. Basically, they are a verb plus a preposition, and when you combine, they create a second significance. Okay, so phrasal verbs are very tricky. They can change the significance of the sentence completely. They are very small, and for this reason, you need to pay a lot of attention to understand and dedicate time to learn phrasal verbs. Okay, so they're really important, and during the class, I mention frequently phrasal verbs and I identify phrasal verbs. Okay, idioms similarly are very frequent and very important. They are expressions, and we use expressions all the time in English, in formal situations, very professional situations, but also in conversational situations, very relaxed situations. So idioms and expressions are a huge part of English, the same as phrasal verbs. They are so important and such a big part of English. They are fundamental, and we have thousands and thousands of phrasal verbs and idioms. So for this reason, they are at the top of my list. So this area is the most important in my opinion. Okay. Accents. People have different accents around the world. In Ireland, we speak a little different compared to England. In Scotland, they speak different. Australia, New Zealand, the United States. So when you learn English, it's a challenge to be conscious and to be aware of all the different accents, the different velocities, the different rhythms, and sometimes it's incredibly difficult to understand native speakers. So for this reason, again, I think it's at the top of the list, and it's maybe the most important aspect when you learn a language. Okay, for me, when I learn Spanish, when I learn French, it's really difficult to understand local native people speaking very, very quickly, native speakers. Okay. Also, conversation. So when you practice English, it's necessary that you practice conversation. You need to find somebody to practice speaking with, and hopefully somebody can correct you. And it's necessary to practice naturally, just different topics, different conversation, and hopefully somebody can correct and help you. During the week, you are welcome to attend the speaking classes with me in the morning at 9 o'clock, and I can help just to practice some speaking in the mornings. Okay, pronunciation. So during the class, I try to identify important pronunciation parts, because sometimes in English it's not phonetic and we have some irregular pronunciations. So during the class, I try to help and try to identify specifically for pronunciation. Okay, so that's the first area, use of English. The second area is tenses. And when you learn English, you need to understand the different times and the different tenses. So basically, do you speak in the present? Do you speak in the past? Do you construct the sentence in the future? So you need to be aware of the different times, the different tenses, and the different concepts. For example, the simple. We have the present simple, past simple, and future simple, which is one action in the present, in the past, and the future. The past simple is problematic because we have a lot of irregular verbs in the past simple. The future simple is generally created with will. I will go, I will eat. So you need to be clear with the idea of the present simple, past simple, future simple. Similarly, you need to be clear with the construction of the present continuous, which is one action continuously happening in the present, the past continuous, the future continuous. For example, I am speaking, I was speaking, I will be speaking. This is the continuous. Number one is the simple, number two is the continuous, and number three is the perfect. So we generally have the present perfect and the past perfect. Yes, we have the future perfect, but the intention and the function of the present perfect is the period in the past. The action is completed, it's over, but the consequences are relevant and related to the present. So the construction is I have eaten, I have gone, I have been. It's a subject, auxiliary have, and the participle of the verb. The participle of the verb is the third column in school when you learn the three columns. So I have eaten my breakfast. It's finished, it's completed, but it is related and relevant to now because at the moment I am not hungry. The difference between the past perfect, we use the past perfect before usually another action in the past simple. So I had eaten my breakfast before my friend contacted me. So that's really the difference between the present perfect and the past perfect. Yes, it exists in the future perfect and it also exists in the present perfect continuous, and we have more advanced structures, but generally, basically, you need to be familiar and aware of the perfect. Okay, so that's the simple, continuous, and perfect. The next idea is the infinitive, and the infinitive is the base or the foundation of the verb, and usually it's with to go, to eat, to have, to drink, to look. This is typically the infinitive, and that's very important in English as well. Also, the conditional. We have a lot of conditionals in English: the zero conditional, first conditional, second, third, mixed, and in the book, in the theory, it's very complicated, but in reality, it's a bit more flexible. It's depending on if and the time. If I go to the shop, I will buy some chocolate. If I spoke to my friend yesterday, I would have mentioned the sport. So basically, conditional is based on if, and in reality, in conversation, it's less strict, but in the book, sometimes it's very heavy and very technical. Okay, so you need to be very comfortable with the conditionals. We also have the active and the passive. So the active structure is typically the subject, the verb, and the object. I drink milk. That's the typical active. And to create the passive, we change the position and we introduce an auxiliary verb. So I drink the milk is the active. And then to change, we say the milk is, that's the extra auxiliary. Drunk is the participle of the original verb, by me. So the concept of the active and the passive is very advanced. It's very fluent. It's very impressive. And if you can use the active and the passive very fluently, it's very impressive and it's really, really good quality and a good level of English. So they are the most important aspects. They are the most important themes and topics and concepts in relation to the tenses. Okay. Finally, we have just grammar concepts and grammar ideas in general. So, of course, you need to be very familiar with the words in orange that are really, really important. For example, a noun, you need to understand the concept of a noun. It's a person, a place, or a thing. Every noun, we have an article, and we have two possible articles in English, a or the. A house in general, but the house, a specific house. This is the article, this is the noun. We also have an adjective, and the function of the adjective is to describe the noun. Okay, so the noun is house, and the adjective is maybe big. Article is the big house. So that's very important in relation to position, because the position of the adjective is before the noun, and this is really important in English. Okay, because other languages, the position of the adjective is maybe after the noun. So English, the position is very important. Also, we have the adverb. So the function of the adverb is to describe better the verb. So we have a lot of verbs: to drink, to go, to talk, to eat, but we use adverbs to describe better the verb. Drink slowly, talk quickly, and typically the adverb ends in ly. In Espanol, it's mente, suavemente, lentamente, but in English, it's softly and slowly. You can see here, the ly is the typical ending, the typical finish of the word in the adverb, and the function of the adverb is to describe the verb better. Okay, so speak quickly, drink slowly. They are very important. Also, we have the concept of countable and uncountable with the noun. So is it possible to count the noun? Bottle, one bottle, two bottles, three bottles. Yes, that's category countable. Water, is it possible to count water? Not really. We say one bottle of water, two bottles of water, 2 liters of water, 2 glasses of water, but water is uncountable. And this is very important in relation to how much and how many. When you can count, we say how many bottles, how many people, how many pens. But when it's impossible to count, we say how much chocolate, how much water, how much food. So that idea is very important of countable and uncountable in relation to how much and how many. Also, for the adjective, we have the comparative and the superlative in relation to the adjective. So you are happy, but this person is happier than you, but this person is the happiest. So this is the comparative and the superlative in the category of adjectives. That's very important as well. Usually it's regular with er depending on the syllable, but sometimes it's more complicated when there's more than one syllable. For example, interesting, more interesting, most interesting. So that area of comparative and superlative is very important. The next topic is modal verbs, and we have a list and a category of modal verbs that are very important. For example, can is related to ability and permission. I can enter the shop, it's my permission and ability. I can play the piano, my ability. Could, may, and might are for possibilities and options. I could go to the shop, I may go to the shop, I might go to the shop. Typical for options and possibilities. They are the three very, very similar verbs. They are practically the same. Possibly may and might are a little more formal, a little more polite. That's the only difference really between could, may, and might. Shall is typical substitution for will. Very common in the question, very formal, very correct. Shall we go to the cinema? Shall we contact your friend? It's a question, will. Bit difficult, a bit formal, but very important. Also, we have should, which is for recommendation and advice. So in the situation for recommendation and advice, we typically use should, or the second verb is ought to. They have the same significance. The pronunciation of the second verb is difficult because the G is silent. So my recommendation, you should visit Italy. You should visit Spain. It's my recommendation. It's my advice. And it's exactly the same. You ought to visit Spain. You ought to visit Ireland. Okay. Must is obligation, and the pronunciation in Ireland and the pronunciation for me possibly is very strong with the U. For example, Dublin, butter, bus. But in reality and in the phonetics, it should be Dublin, butter, bus. And here we have must. But it's obligation. You have no choice. You must collect the children. You must do the exercise. You must run. Okay, it's obligation and you have no choice. The next verb is almost the same, have to for obligation. You have to collect the children. You have to watch the movie. So modal verbs are very important in different areas and in different situations. But the big rule with the modal verb, it normally is before another verb. But the next verb we eliminate to, because normally the verb is to go, to eat, to drink. But when you have the modal before, we eliminate to, can go, might have, should look. Okay, so that's very important. And that's probably the most important rule in relation to the modals. Prepositions, we have maybe 150 prepositions in English, and they are basically related to movement, to direction, and to position. Okay, so prepositions are a big part of English for direction, for movement, and for position. We also use prepositions in phrasal verbs, and usually the preposition is associated with emotion in relation to the phrasal verb. Okay, for example, direction, I speak in general, I speak to you. Okay, look, I look in general, but I look at the television. Direction. And then movement, I run across the road, or I run through the street, à travers. So prepositions are very important. They're very small words, but they have a big significance and they can change the sentiment of the sentence very, very easily. Okay. The next section is important. There are three areas. We have possessive adjectives, we have possessive pronouns, and we have object pronouns. That is the technical name. They are the technical names for the three areas. But in reality, the difference is my football, your football, his football, her football is the adjective. Okay. But then the possessive pronoun, the football is mine, the football is yours, the football is his, the football is hers. So you need to be very clear in the difference and the use between the possessive adjective and the possessive pronoun, especially with masculine and feminine. It is his football, it is her football, or the football is his, or the football is hers, because that's the typical confusion. So you need to be very clear in that area. And the third category is the object pronoun. So I give the football to you, I give the football to him, masculine, I give the football to her, feminine. So you need to be very, very clear. Also, the difference between this, that, these, and those is classic. And during the class, I try to identify the example. This is singular here, that is singular away, these is plural here, and those is plural away. Similarly, you need to be very clear with the difference between another, other, the other, and the others. So this is very important. Construction of the question is important, and this is a typical topic in grammar. You need to be very sure and very confident about the construction of a question in English. And later, I will explain a specific webinar in relation to grammar, in relation to questions, because it's an important area. Okay. One of my favorite areas is maybe the suffixes and the prefixes. So when you study a language in general, it's very important to be aware and to be conscious of the suffixes and the prefixes. They are little endings of the word. You can see here ance, ize, able. So you need to be very sure of the significance of a suffix. For example, ance is typically noun, importance. Okay, ize is typically the verb, to realize, to monetize, to fantasize. They're typical verbs, and the suffix is ize. Able is typical adjective, manageable, reachable. So the study and the focus on the suffixes and the prefixes are very important to indicate the form of the word. Okay, linkers, conjunctions. So in English, we have different linkers and conjunctions. We have simple linkers and, but, and we have more advanced linkers. However, although furthermore, moreover, and they change in relation to formality and informal situations. So linkers are very advanced. They're very important for cohesion, to connect sentences. So it's a very important area, linkers, and it's very impressive when you use them correctly and when you choose the correct appropriate linker. Okay, and that's it. They are the most important topics in relation to the introduction. Every day I try to introduce these vocabulary because during the class I mention very frequently all the vocabulary in relation to the technical vocabulary here. Okay, writing is very important and it's a completely different ability. So there are 5 areas in English. When you study English, you need to be very comfortable with 5 different areas. Writing is one, it's completely different. You need to practice. Listening is another area that's completely different. You need to practice. Speaking is the same. Reading is very important. So you need to read a lot. You need to read different magazines, books, newspapers, and finally, grammar. You need to maybe prepare the grammar. You need to understand the grammar. So those 5 areas are very important when you learn any language, and English is exactly the same. Exam preparation. Exams are very popular in English. We have the Cambridge exams, first certificate, advanced certificate, proficiency certificate. We have a lot of exams with Cambridge and they're very popular and very important. Similarly, we have the IELTS exams, and I have prepared, I have organized specific webinars dedicated to exams. For example, normally on Saturday we have a first certificate webinar. On Thursday we have an advanced webinar for Cambridge and Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, and on Wednesday we have a specific webinar for the IELTS. So they are the typical webinars that we need, that we focus specifically on exams. Okay, so that document is very, very important. Now I want to look at phrasal verbs. So I want to continue with phrasal verbs. So first, this this document is for the social media. So if you want to connect on social media, I have the Instagram page, and every morning I post some exercises on Instagram, and in the afternoon I post some tips and some quotations and some advice in relation to English on the Instagram page. Twitter is practically the same as the Facebook page, and the YouTube channel has all the free classes on YouTube. Some people prefer YouTube, so that's a possibility. So the phrasal verb, we are on page 13. So let me look for page 13, and this is the same list every day. We continue with the explanation little by little of the phrasal verbs. They are very important, and remember, the concept of the phrasal verb is the verb plus a preposition, and the significance is possible literal, but the significance is also completely different as well. Okay, so that's the trick with the phrasal verbs. And yesterday we finished with the phrasal verb to mix up, and you remember the explanation, to confuse or to mix up. That's the significance of the phrasal verb, to mix up. Okay, so let me make the text a little bit bigger so everybody can see, and I'll just continue with the next. Sorry, I'm going to make it a bit bigger because that did not work, so I'll make the text a little bit bigger and we can continue with the explanation of the phrasal verbs. So here, everybody understands a name. My name is Brian. Your name is obviously a particular name for you, but it is possible a verb. Okay, so it is possible a verb to name. So I name my dog, I name the building. So people or the government name the street. So the name is the noun, but it is possible to name, as in the action or the verb to give a name. Okay, you can also say to call, which is very, very similar. Call is more physical. You like gritar, to shout. If I call somebody, I shout. So call and shout are very similar, but also it's typical for the telephone. If you call your friend, it's very typical for the telephone. But to name is to give the name, okay? And it's possible with the preposition to name after, and this is very typical. So my name is Brian, and I am named after my granddad, for example. So in hypothetical, for example, my granddad's name is Brian, so I have the same name. I am named after my grandfather, okay? That's a bit difficult, but that is the phrasal verb, and it's typical for the street. The street is named after the celebrity. the street is named after the politician. It's the same name because of the famous person. Okay. In this situation, we have another phrasal verb to take after in relation to family. Your behavior is the same as your father, or your behavior is the same as your mother. So you take after your father, you take after your mother, and the significance is you behave, compartir, you behave with the same action and the same characteristics as your parents. So, for example, if you take after your mother, that has the significance you behave or you act the same way as your parents or the same way as your mother. Okay, so that's really, really typical. But obviously, name after is different, and it's a different context and a different significance completely. Okay, that's typical. And I suppose we have one or two more. There's one expression I'm thinking: the apple does not fall far from the tree. Okay, so this is an idiom, but the significance is the apple. When the apple falls from the tree, it's very close. Okay, so this is a metaphor in behavior. The child, the characteristics and the behavior of the child is the same practically as the father. Okay, but it's individual, but at the same time, they are very similar. So this is an expression to express the behavior and the action of the child is almost the same as the father or the mother. Okay, we have another expression um, which is more difficult because a chip is very flexible. The verb is to chip, which is related to wood. And for example, my tooth, I have my front tooth and I chip my tooth. It's when you hit your tooth. That's the action. So in relation to wood, you chip the wood. It's this action. And potatoes, when you make the chips, it's the same action because you chip. Okay. So it's typical with teeth. It's typical with potatoes. It's typical in poker because you have the money and you have the small pieces related to the money. So chips are very, very flexible. And a block, I think, is very clear. A big block is the original concrete, and a chip of the old block is the preposition of. So the significance is the chip, the small person, the small son, the baby is the same content, is the same material, the same characteristics as the father or the mother. So that's a very, very famous expression. You are a chip of the old block. So that means you have the same behavior as your parents or your father or your mother. Okay. We have a lot of phrasal verbs with to chip in. So there is a phrasal verb to chip in, okay, and the significance is to contribute. So for example, I have maybe €5, my friend has €5, so a small quantity, small quantity. Another friend has €5 and they chip, which is this action to chip. So they put in €5. So the significance to chip in is to contribute maybe a little, okay, and that's very typical. It's not only possible with money. Yes, it's very typical with money. I chip in €5, but it's also possible with effort and work. So in the house, we have a lot of work. We need to clean, we need to wash, we need to cook. So everybody needs to chip in. So everybody needs to make a small contribution. Very, very typical. We also have another famous expression, a chip on your shoulder is very, very good. And I'll get the spelling correct. So if you have a chip on your shoulder, it means a little pain on your shoulder, but it's a metaphor that you have a negative attitude. You have a very sad and bitter, como amagro. You have a bitter attitude because something happened in the past and you are not happy and you regret. So you feel sad about the action in the past. You feel disappointed. So that's a famous expression. You have a chip on your shoulder means you have an attitude. So that's very, very famous. We have a lot of expressions with chip, to chip in, a chip off the old block. But remember, the expression a chip off the old block is connected with the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, which is connected to the phrasal verb to take after. Okay, and here it's different because to name after is just literal, to give the name after the other person because it's related to time. The grandfather lives here and you come after. So it's logical and it's very typical. The next verb is very, very good. Okay, it's very advanced, it's very fluent. We use it a lot, the verb to nod, and it's the movement of your head. When your head moves a little like this, it's to nod. Okay, and of course, when you agree in the situation or the context, when you agree, you typically nod your head. Okay, so if you agree, it's famous and I think international, you nod your head to say yes. So that's number one, to nod your head in agreement. And that's very, very typical. But it could be in relation to selection. So if you have a choice, you are the manager and you need to select a candidate, okay, and you have this candidate, this candidate, this candidate, you can give a nod in the direction of the person you want to select. So if I give you the nod, I select you, or I give you permission. So that's typical as well. To give somebody the nod is to give permission or to select that person, okay? So that is typical as well, to give someone the nod. That's very famous. And here we have the phrasal verb to nod off. And this is very, very typical. It's very common in conversation. Maybe it's difficult for you to understand, but it's in the context of sleeping. When you are very, very tired, okay, imagine I am very, very tired and I'm falling, caer, fall asleep, because physically you fall. And in the same situation, we say to nod off, okay? So to nod off is to fall asleep. It's exactly the same significance, really fluent, really common, and really typical. And off is important because usually the computer is on, the television is on, and the significance is functioning. But if the television is off, the computer is off, it's not functioning. And if you are awake, you're on, but if you're asleep, you're off. Okay, so to nod off means to fall asleep. Really, really typical, really common, and very fluent example of a phrasal verb in English. And they are the most typical expressions in relation to nod in agreement, to give somebody nod has the significance to select or to choose the person, or to give permission. Okay, so really good examples of to nod off, and that is the most typical. And here are the two examples. I was named after my grandfather. So this is a little more complicated because it's the passive, because my family named me after my grandfather, but I was named. That's an example of the active and the passive. Okay. The next example is the movie was so boring that I nodded off. So this is very important as well for three reasons. The difference between bored and boring is very, very important. I don't know if you understand the difference between bored and boring because it's very, very important. We say bored and boring. We say excited and exciting. We say interested and interesting. So you need to be very, very clear with the difference. It's a big, big difference. For example, your sentiment, the sentiment of the person, the feeling of the person is bored. I am bored. I am excited. I am interested. It's my sensation. It's my feeling. But number two, the movie. If it's away from you, the movie is boring. The holiday was boring. The book is boring. The movie is exciting. The holiday was exciting or interesting. So the difference is very, very big between your sensation and the description of the object or the event away. It's very common confusion, and a lot of people make this error frequently. So you need to be very, very clear with the difference between bored and boring. And here we have another lesson, because we say so is to intensify with the adjective. You are happy, but this person is so happy. It's to intensify. Okay. And usually when you have so, we have the consequence with that. And here you can see it's connected with that. So plus the adjective, and that is the typical structure, the consequence. You are so happy that you could run around the room. Okay. Um, Very simple, but it's a very important structure, and it might be very necessary for you to be familiar. So here, it's so boring, and the consequence of boring movie was that. I nod is the verb in the past. It's regular, just an extra D. I nodded off. Before it is the movie, a substitution for the movie, was finished. Really good example, really excellent English. And the next list we have is interesting as well. So we continue with N. And that's very important, the verb to nod off, okay, and the verb to nod. And the second phrasal verb with N is to nose. So obviously the nose is the part of the body. This is my nose. These are my eyes, ears, mouth, lips, chin. So we have a lot of vocabulary for the face. This is the forehead, okay? The forehead is important. So the nose is this part of the body. you need to be very clear the difference between the nose and the noise. So this is number one, and this is the typical confusion, okay? So first, a nose and the noise are completely different. Noise in Espanol is la ruida, and nose I think is la nez, I think. So very different in English. And basically the adjective is possible for the two. You can have a nosy person or you can have a noisy street. So they're completely different, but they look very similar. Okay, so nosy person is the adjective, and then you can have a noisy street, and they are completely different. So a nosy person is typical for the person who is interfering in your business, or who is listening to your conversation, or who is looking at your material. So if I am a nosy person, I move my nose in other people's business, in other people's information, because my eyes and my nose move together. So it's very important, and the phrasal verb is related to this. So to nose around has the significance that you look, or that you search, or you look at other people's business, you look at other people's document, and it's private for other people, but you invade or you violate the privacy. Okay, so to nose around, because the preposition is to move around, and it means you look and you violate the privacy of other people's. Okay. Here they have the vocabulary to sneak, and this is very good as well, to sneak. And the significance is to move very quietly. So after the party finishes at 3 o'clock in the morning, you decide to return home, but you know people are asleep, you know people are at home, so you go very quietly. Okay, so you sneak into the room or you sneak around. Okay, so it's really good vocabulary. And there is another verb as well, to creep. So two verbs are probably a little negative. So to sneak is to be very dishonest, because you're trying to be quiet, you're trying to be very secretive. It could be positive, but it is possible very negative as well. And to nose around is probably negative. Okay? And you can see the example. I hate it when my mother noses, because it's the third person. And remember, the third person in the present typically has the S. I go, you go, she goes, he goes, I do, you do, he does. So the third person in the present typically has the S. So I hate it when my mother noses around my room. So really good example. The mother or the father or the sister or the brother could violate your privacy by looking in your room and searching, interfering with your things. Okay, so that's really good. The next verb is to occur. So we continue with the letter O, and the first verb is to occur. Number one, this is very similar to the verb to happen. Okay, so to occur and to happen are very similar and very important. I think ocurrir is more typical in Spanish, and happen is maybe more typical in English, but the two are possible, and the significance is exactly the same. So here we have a structure: occur to me, occur to you, occur to him, and this is a typical structure, very advanced. It occurred to me, it occurred to you, and this is very important and very typical, and the significance is como darse cuenta, and maybe in English the translation is to realize. So darse cuenta in español is to realize, y también realizar in español is como to do in English. So it's a false friend. You need to be very careful, because realizar in Spanish is equal to maybe the verb to do. So, por ejemplo, realizar un examen is to do an exam or to sit an exam. Okay, so we say to do an exam, or to sit an exam, or to take an exam. And in Spanish, you say realizar un examen. Okay, so that's a good example, the difference. So the structure, it occurred to me, has the significance I realized. For example, Saturday, I'm thinking, and de repente, suddenly, it occurred to me that I left the food in the microwave. So it's a problem when you forget, you suddenly, de repente, okay, so suddenly is de repente, it occurred to me, I realized I left the food in the kitchen. Okay, so that's really good. Here, the verb they say to pop into my mind is to enter into your memory suddenly, very quickly. So to pop is very quick action, And with pop, you can say to pop in, to pop out, to pop around. These are very, very typical expressions in conversation. So for example, if your friend wants to visit your house, your friend wants to visit you very quickly, it's possible to say pop in for 5 minutes, because, or the opposite, if you want to leave your house, you pop out for 5 minutes. Very, very typical. You are in a meeting, in a professional situation, and you want to leave the meeting for 2 minutes. You want to pop out for 2 minutes, take a phone call, and return. So very typical. And the same with your friend to visit, because your friend lives here and you live here, so you need to travel around. So pop around, pop in. Very typical. And here, it's to pop into your mind. It's to appear suddenly in your mind, to occur to me. Really, really typical. And here's the example. It did not occur to us, plural, okay, us, plural, that we had left the iron on. Really good example. So the iron is the plancha, okay, so the verb is to iron. The noun is the iron, la plancha. So after you wash the clothes, you dry the clothes, and you iron the clothes. But we have a phrasal verb in relation to the iron. We say to iron out. Okay, and this is very typical. If you have a problem, imagine the problem is very difficult, very uncomfortable, so it's necessary for you to iron out the problem. And the significance is to solve the problem, resolve, or to fix. Okay, to solve the problem, to iron out the problem. Very, very typical example. And here, it didn't occur to us. So this is a synonym. We did not realize, we did not remember that we had left the iron on. And on is typical for the appliance, for the electricity. You leave the computer on, the television on, and in relation to the washing machine with poner, we say to put the television on. So this is very important. The word on is really, really important because most people forget. So the typical translation, which is the error, people say put the television, porque poner la television, poner la radio. Pero in inglés, it's necessary on. You need to say put the television on, put the radio on, put the washing machine on. So there's a big difference in English between put the washing machine, put the radio, or put the radio on and put the washing machine on. So that's very, very important. And here it's to leave, como dejar, leave the iron on. Okay, good. The next example is with the letter O, and this is very, very typical as well. The verb to open, so which is abrir, okay, open your bag, open the bottle. So open is very important, but it's a metaphor for a person. So I think you can hear my dog as well, but it's a metaphor in relation to a person, your emotions. Imagine the emotions for the woman or the emotions for the man are inside, and sometimes we maintain the emotions inside, which is maybe a bad idea. So there's a phrasal verb here to bottle. So it's related to a bottle, your emotions, you bottle up your emotions, which is very typical phrasal verb. To bottle up your emotion is to keep your emotion in you, which is maybe negative because eventually it can spill. So the opposite is to open up. Okay, so to open up is the significance to tell or to share or to give your emotions to other people. So it's very, very typical, the phrasal verb to open up. So imagine the situation. The person is normally very private. The person is very, very quiet. But one day they decide to open up and they decide to tell, they decide to reveal, or they decide to show or to share. So there's 4 vocabulary that are very, very similar: to show, to reveal, to share, or to give their opinions or to give their emotions, okay, or to tell. So they're all very, very similar vocabulary. And here, the example is to share feelings or emotions, to open up. Okay, I think that's logical. That's very typical in conversation. And the example, I am glad. Glad is the significance of happy. I am glad you arrived. I am glad it is good weather. I am happy. Okay, so glad is very good. Most people understand happy, but glad is more advanced, it's more fluent, and it's very, very good. I am happy, I am glad that John feels comfortable enough. So the position of enough is very, very important also in English. The translation of enough in Spanish is suficiente. Probably in Portuguese it's similar, but the position of enough is very important. Typically, it's after the adjective. Are you happy? Enough. Are you hungry? Enough, okay? But the position of enough is before the noun. Do you have enough time? Do you have enough food? So the position is different in relation to the adjective and in relation to the noun, okay? And here it's the adjective, so we need to put the position of enough after, okay? So he feels comfortable enough. And this is a typical error. So if you make the mistake and if you say enough comfortable, people understand you, but it's also a very obvious error and it's a very obvious mistake. So you need to be very, very careful, okay? Around me, so he feels very comfortable around me to open up. Really good example. The next one in relation to out, yeah, out to go, out to try. Maybe it's possible. More, we say open to do. Okay, so if I say to you, I am open to learning, I am open to learn, I am open to visit, and that means you are available or you have the positive attitude and you consider. So if you are open to learn, that means you have the possibility or the intention to learn. Or if you are open to visit, that means you are available for people to visit. And here in this book, they say out to. So here's the example. She, okay, this is very typical. Yes, this is a very typical sentence. So she is the subject, the verb is to be. So she is out to get revenge. Okay, and this is very, very typical. So revenge, when something bad happens to you and you want to rectify the situation, you want to be equal with the situation. So somebody does something bad to you, you want to rectify the situation, you want to retaliate. So you are out, which means your intention, because in the house you do nothing. In the house it's very quiet, there's no action, there's no activity in. So out means your attack. So that's the connection. You are out, it's like attack. You are out to get is the significance to achieve, como lograr. You are out to get revenge is very, very typical. So she is out, so that means she is attacking, her intention to get, to obtain revenge. The pronunciation is important. Now that her husband, so this is the possessive adjective, my husband, your husband, his husband, her husband, our husband. So it's the possessive adjective. Left is dejar, in the past irregular, the verb to leave. Left me, left you, left her. For, another is typical for singular. Remember the difference? Another day, another person, another year, singular, and woman is singular, but plural is women. So you need to be very clear between one man, two men, one woman, two women, one person, two people. So it's very, very important, okay? So that's very typical expression, out to get revenge. I am out to have a good time. And that means my intention is to have a good time. So Saturday, I am out to have a good time. It's my intention to have a good time. I am out to get a new iPhone. That's my intention, to get, to obtain a new iPhone. So it's simple, very simple for native speakers, but it might be difficult for people learning English to understand this expression. Okay, so that's a good example. The next letter is P, and this is very, very good and very advanced vocabulary. So to pan out is very difficult to explain. I think it's related to panoramic. So panoramic is like the view, and normally the panoramic is flat. You know, flat. Flat is the opposite for the mountain, when the mountain is very high, but the opposite is flat. For example, Holland and the Netherlands is very flat. It's País Bajos, because Bajo is low. So flat is very, very similar. So maybe pan is related to bread in Spanish, but to pan out is very, very typical in English. And let me explain an example. So it means at the beginning, your idea, your holiday, your trip, you have a lot of ideas for your holiday. So the ideas are very dramatic, they're very incredible, but reality is maybe also difficult. So the plans are very flexible, but reality is very problematic also. So after 2 weeks of thinking, everything will pan out, and the significance is be calm. Okay, so I don't know how the pandemic will in the future pan out, because obviously the pandemic at the moment is crazy, it's volatile, and in 2 weeks, in 2 months, everything probably will be different. And that's the expression, in 2 weeks, in 2 months, everything, the pandemic will pan out. So pan out is like to be calm and to be comfortable and to be, you can discover the reality. So it's a really, really advanced structure. Very, very good. I don't know how the holiday will pan out because my plan is fantastic. My intention is brilliant. My expectation is brilliant. But in reality, I don't know how it will be. Okay, and here's the example. They use the verb to be, successful, and you remember the family of success and successful. So successful is the adjective, success is the noun, and the verb is to succeed. Okay, so let me show you. The verb is to succeed, the adjective is successful, and the noun is success. Okay, so you need to be very, very clear and very sure with the difference. So the verb is to succeed, which is very typical with the preposition in and typical with ing. So here's one structure. I succeeded in winning the match. I succeeded in getting the book. I succeeded in buying the chocolate. So the significance is the verb. The structure is typically with the preposition in and the ing, and the significance of the adjective is successful, which is exitoso in Espanol, and success is éxito in Espanol. Okay, so here it's the verb to be successful, but we have another phrasal verb which is very, very important and difficult. So to turn out is to have the final result. One example, lasagna. I prepared lasagna. I make the lasagna. I prepare the lasagna. 1 hour, it takes a long time to cook the lasagna, maybe 1 hour. And finally, the lasagna turns out to be very good. So the significance is the final result. So to turn out, the significance is finally very good. So you prepare your holiday, you plan your holiday, a lot of problems which you prepare and you plan, and finally the holiday turned out very good. And the significance is the final result was very, very good. So here's the example in relation to pan out. Okay. Yes, it's a good example. So the trip, the holiday, the adventure, the travel to, direction. Okay, the trip, the travel, the adventure to Vegas did not, in the negative, did not pan out. Perfect example. So you prepare the idea for Vegas, you prepare, you search, you investigate, but finally, after 2 weeks, it was impossible because it was too expensive, so it did not pan out. Very good example. A little difficult, but very, very fluent. The next one is maybe more literal and more typical and definitely a little easier. So to pass is typical in football. You pass the football, okay, you give the football to another person. Number one. Number two, it's maybe to skip. You remember yesterday we saw to jump or to skip. So to skip the queue, to skip the line. If you want to skip a party, so you have the invitation for the party, but you decide not to go because you are sick or you are tired and you decide not to go. So it's possible to pass the party, which means you do not go. Possible in a typical question, if somebody asks you a difficult question and you pass the question, you ignore the question. You do not answer the question. So the pass is very important. But also in time and movement. So I passed the shop, I travelled to Dublin and I passed the shop. But the significance to pass away is related to a metaphor for life. So life is here, everybody is here, a lot of activity. And if the person dies, como the verb to die, okay, we typically say to pass away. So this person is very sick, this person is very, very old, but everybody is here, and this person finally passes away. And the significance is to die. Okay, so that's really, really typical, really common, and obviously sad. So to pass away is to die. Okay. The next two are interesting. So my example with to not attend the party. So if you pass on the party, it's possible to say pass the party or pass on something. Okay, so to pass the party is to jump the party, to skip the party, not to attend the party, number one. But it is possible the preposition I pass on the party, which has the same significance. I decide not to go. So it's possible the preposition on because it's in relation to the party. I pass on. Okay, that's number one. Difficult because there is a second significance to not attend. Okay, or the second significance to pass on is in relation to information or knowledge. Okay, so if I pass on information or if I pass on knowledge, so I am 34, okay, and I have a little experience, and my little sister, or for example, or my little cousin is maybe very, very small, and I want to give my experience, I want to give my information to my cousin, I want to pass on my information to my cousin, which has the significance to give your information or to give your knowledge. So the pronunciation is difficult. Knowledge, which is conocimiento. So to pass on information and to pass on knowledge is physical and literal. And the other example is with the virus. Here's the first example with the virus, like to transmit. So it's logical because you have the virus, this person has the virus, and this person passes on the virus, because on is the significance to continue. So this person passes on the virus, which means moves the virus to another person. Okay. Then the second possibility, or the third possibility with pass on, is the same as pass away. So to pass away, because life is here, and pass away, which means you are not here, so you die, you pass away. But to pass on is possible in relation to time to die, because this is the life that everybody lives, and then the afterlife is here. So to pass on is to continue to the afterlife. Okay, so to pass on and to pass away are very, very typical in relation to die. They have the same significance, really. It's logical, and with phrasal verbs in general, you need to be very open minded, and you need to be a little flexible with the interpretation, because usually they are logical. So to pass on means to go to the next life, okay, or to pass away means to die because you are not here. So it's logical, but they're very flexible, and they're very typical, and they're very common in conversation. Um, and then the other phrasal verb with pass is a bit more difficult. This is very, very difficult, to pass something off. Okay, this is probably the most difficult today. I'll read you the explanation. Try to convince someone that something is real. Okay, I'll give you one example. I am from Ireland. Okay, I am from Ireland, but I try, maybe on my holiday, I visit Madrid, and I explain to the people. They ask me, Brian, where are you from? And I say, oof, I am from America. So I pretend. So the verb to pretend, which I think is fingir in Espanol. So to pretend, like to contar un mentira, to tell a lie. So I pretend to be from United States. So I try to pass myself off as American. Very, very difficult to explain. Very typical, very fluent. And here's the example. Okay, so I try to pass myself off as an American. So I pretend, I try to convince. This is the significance of off, because I am here, and I try to convince the other people with my voice, with my action, with my dress. So to pass off because it's on you. And here's the example. Maybe the example is better. Okay, so he tried. The verb is to try, como intentar. It's irregular. He tried to pass the fake watch off as a real Rolex. So you can see the structure is typical. As I tried to pass myself off as an American, but here he tried, he attempted, so the verb to attempt is very important as well. To try and to attempt, really, really good vocabulary. So he tried to pass off. You can see the phrasal verb here, but the fake watch is the product. So the watch, okay, and fake is not real. You are real or fake. So he tried to pass the fake watch off as a real Rolex. Perfect example. The sentence is really, really good. A bit difficult to understand, very fluent, very advanced, very difficult if you are learning English. A good example of a phrasal verb, and that's one sentence. He tried to pass the fake watch off as a real Rolex. Okay. Then we said pass on, pass on. And the next one is pass out. Okay, and there are two possibilities with pass out. They are very, very typical. Number one is literal. So it's like to distribute. My company teaching English, and I have information on paper. So I have like advertisement on my paper, and I go to the city centre and I pass out the paper. I pass out the advertisement. That's number one. It's literal. The second one, to pass out, is completely different, and it's related to medical situations. So if you are very, very tired, you're very, very sick, you're very, very sad, and at the end of the night, you are so tired so tired, consequences, so tired that you pass out. Okay, so this is typical. At 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, you are at the party, but you're so tired, you're almost sleeping, and then finally you pass out. Again, because the action, the activity is in, the party is in here, but you pass out, so you are away. But remember, the difference: pass away is to die, but pass out is maybe just to sleep. Okay, it's just possible to sleep, but it could be related to medicine, it could be related to drugs. So maybe alcohol or drugs, and the person has too much, demasiado, and they pass out. Okay, so that's typical and very, very good. Here's the example: to become unconscious. So it could be severe, it could be dramatic, but it could be flexible in relation to sleeping. Okay, and finally is another typical, this is another typical example: to pass up is very similar with the phrasal verb to pass on. For example, to not attend, I pass on the party, and it's possible to say to pass up an opportunity, which has the significance that you reject. Okay, to reject and to pass up are very, very typical. So to pass up an opportunity is to reject the opportunity, and I think up is significant because you have the opportunity here and you pass up, so you have no possession of the opportunity, like to give up. Okay, to give up is to sacrifice, and to pass up is very, very similar as well. So difficult, very fluent, very small. You can see a perfect example: very, very small vocabulary, very small combinations, but extremely important in the significance, and maybe completely different from your first impression. Okay, so very, very good. And finally, we say to pay somebody back. So this is a completely different verb: pagar, to pay. And typically with the verb to pay, we say to pay for. Okay, so to pay for the restaurant, to pay for the food, to pay for the hotel. Typically in English, it's to pay for. Okay, and here it's possible the phrasal verb to pay back. Okay, and this is important because I pay you, so I give you €10 as a favor. I give you €10 and you pay me back. Okay, so it's the significance to you and back. So to pay somebody back is to repay. And here you can see the prefix re has the significance to do again, because in English we can say to redo, to remake, to rewatch. We have a lot of prefixes and a lot of verbs with re, and the significance is to do again. And we can also say to replay. So here repay with sin ele is completely different. So to replay is como jugar de nuevo, and here it's pagar de nuevo. So completely different. And the example: if I loan you money, this is very important as well, because in English we have the verb to loan and to borrow, to lend and to borrow. Okay, so these are very, very important vocabulary, very important words. So for example, my telephone: I loan you my telephone. Como prestar, I loan you my telephone. I lend you my telephone. But you borrow my telephone. You borrow my mobile phone. Okay, so there's a big difference between to lend and to borrow. I think in Spanish it's prestar y dar de prestar, and you need to be very, very clear and very sure and very confident with the difference. And here's the example: if I loan you money, the question is, will you, because it's the question, because normally the affirmative you will you pay me back? Will you return the money? Really good example. Okay, brilliant. So that's one page in relation to phrasal verbs, and really good. I'm happy because that's very, very important vocabulary, really good quality, really fluent, really typical examples of phrasal verbs. And you remember the introduction: use of English. We have accents, phrasal verbs, idioms, and pronunciation. They are the most important areas during my class, I think, are the key. So this is just one area of phrasal verbs, and you can see the flexibility, you can see the importance of phrasal verbs, and it is so key and so fundamental to learn English perfectly and to master. So it's just one area, but during the weeks, during the classes, we will continue with different parts of English and different aspects, but this is just one aspect. Okay, so I think everything is okay. That's probably sufficient for today, an introduction, and we focus primarily on the phrasal verbs. I will give you the link for the class if you want to connect now. Okay, so it's a possibility to practice some speaking. This is the meeting ID and the meeting code here. If you want to join, if you want to connect with the meeting, it's possible. Remember, everything is free, so it's a free class, and I'm very, very happy to teach for free. Hopefully, it's a good opportunity for you, and hopefully, this class can help people with very little possibility to pay a teacher or with no possibility to pay a class. But if you can and if you want to support me, if you want to contribute and to say thank you for the work and the class, you can make a little contribution. The best possibility is probably bank transfer. There is no commission, so it's a direct transfer of maybe €1 or €2 if you are happy and if you want to donate and contribute. Here is the IBAN and the BIC, so you can make a direct transfer if you want to tip and to say thank you. The second possibility is Revolut, which is a popular application, and the telephone number. You just need the telephone number to contribute. And the third possibility is Bizum, which is very popular in Spain. So if you want to help me with a small donation and to support me to say thank you as a little tip, this would be fantastic for me. It's my job, and hopefully I can continue working in this way. And some people have contributed already and donated, so thank you very much to everybody who has supported me. And if you want to make a contribution today, you can just donate with the bank, and you can use Revolut or Bizum. Okay, so I think that's the most important information for today. Remember, next week we continue in the morning. Next week, hopefully on Monday at 9 o'clock, we have a speaking class. So there's a speaking group on Monday at 9 o'clock. You can join, you can book your place with the WhatsApp group. Tuesday is the same, and probably, hopefully, every day next week. Also, the free class at 11:15 will continue next week, hopefully from Monday. And we also have specific webinars next week as well in the afternoon. So you're very welcome to attend. You're very welcome to participate. And also, if you have any questions, you can please ask me some questions on the Facebook page, or you can get in contact as well. Okay, so I think that's everybody. Again, you are welcome to participate now if you have a question. This is the code here for the Zoom meeting. I am using Zoom and I'm using Facebook Live. So you are welcome to connect if you want. That's the ID and the code. I think Facebook Live is still working, so I'll just double check now. And I hope that we're still connected, because sometimes the internet is a bit slow and a bit bad. So I think we're working, which is brilliant. So again, thank you so much, everybody. And more importantly, enjoy the holiday. Happy Easter. It's a very important holiday and a very important time to relax. And I hope that you enjoy your holiday. Thank you so much for the last month, the last 2 months. So now we start April, and hopefully we can continue in a good rhythm and a good way with the classes in April. And again, thank you for all the work in March. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you enjoy your Saturday, and happy Easter tomorrow, and happy Easter on Monday, and have a great weekend. So thank you so much. And now I'll just try to finish